Welcome to The Way the World Works, where the trusted team behind the Tuttle Twins books tackles current events, hot topics, and fun ideas to help your family find clarity in a world full of confusion.
Hi, Connor.
Hey, Brittany.
So I haven't thought about the term manifest destiny in years. Probably not since I was in grade school, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
But I was having a conversation the other day with people who are fairly like-minded as I am, or with me, and somebody mentioned how great manifest destiny was and how it, made America what it is today. And I had to stop and kind of think about this because I'm like, wait a second, what? So for starters, let's talk about what manifest destiny is. But I want to dive into what it was, and was it good? Is it a bad thing? And I want to get your thoughts, Connor. But let's start first with talking about what manifest destiny is. It sounds like a cool band name to me, or like a Taylor Swift song name. To be honest, that's what it sounds like. So it was a term coined in the middle of the 1800s, and this is America was still less than 100 years old, and it's getting a little, it's like big population boom, right? They actually need more space to put all these people because people are coming over here, and this term was coined. And what it meant is that like America had this destiny given to it by, God, to expand the power of the country across the whole North American continent. And, and I, every time you hear this phrase, you should run, but bring democracy to, anybody they met along the way. And this was this big idea. This was this big sense of like, we're going to expand, we're going to be great. But it was responsible for a lot of westward expansion. So like Texas, the Louisiana Purchase, things like this. That's what made the country bigger. That's how we expanded. That's how we adopted more states. But it also caused a lot of harm along the way because, as I'm sure many of you guys know, there were people here before we got here. There were a lot of Native Americans, and as we pushed onward, we just kind of kicked them out of the play. Who did the Trail of Tears? Who was that? Was that
Andrew
Van
Jackson, I
Buren?
believe.
Well, it was Andrew Jackson. That's right, because he got us out of debt, but he also, unfortunately, displaced a lot of Native Americans because they wanted that land. And that's actually something, Connor, that still has consequences today. That I think in the West, coming from California, Utah, we saw a lot of, because you have reservations, which reservations is the land that they gave the Native Americans as kind of like, we're kicking you off your land. Here's this land. But there's a lot of poverty that happens there. There's a lot of things like addiction and alcoholism that's just kind of a product of that. My nephew went to live in Arizona for 2 years for his church, and he spent a lot of time on a reservation, and the things he saw there, just, he said it's really sad, and a lot of that happened because of this belief that it's like the ends justify the means, that as a country, we were allowed to do anything as long as it was, like, for the greater good of the country.
Mhm.
And that that to me, when I heard this friend of mine say, "Oh, well, it's good because we wouldn't be what we are today," the first thing that came into my mind was empire building.
Mhm.
And that's not something, we don't think of that as something we're doing here or did in the North American continent. But, Connor, a lot of us who are anti-war, we hear about America going over to other places and occupying or spreading empire. And I think that automatically sends off a red flag of, this is a bad thing.
Mhm.
This is not our place. So I'm thinking about this and I'm like, okay, I don't think manifest destiny is a good thing at all, but I'm interested to say or hear what you think, Connor, and then I have a few more thoughts to add.
Well, let me pose a thought experiment. Let's say you own a home and your neighbor begins building his home, and he builds it bigger and bigger, and he realizes he needs or wants more property. He wants to put in a pool, a tennis court, and so he claims that, God has told him to do this, that it's his destiny to expand his property, and you're the next door neighbor. I think anyone in that position would be a little skeptical about the claim that, oh, okay, you say that, God told you to, or you claim some superior, right to just expand your property. So even though you're encroaching on my property and stealing my resources and forcing me to move, you know, that's okay. I should be okay with it
Mhm.
because like, that's ridiculous. no one think that's okay under the scenario that I just outlined. Well, that's basically what happened with the U.S. government. It was Andrew Jackson. They passed a law called the Indian Removal Act, and he was the one that pushed it through Congress. This is in 1830. And the government spent the next like 3 decades pushing Native Americans westward beyond the Mississippi. In one case, they had more than 15,000 members of the Cherokee tribe walk from their homes in like the southern states to a territory that today is in Oklahoma. This was in 1838. And many of them died along the way. This became known as the Trail of Tears, and thousands of people died, and they were forced to relocate from their home, all because these white settlers in Northern America felt entitled to their property. Especially in the South, a lot of the land was like prime, fertile
Hmm.
land for the cultivation of cotton, which was a really big industry in the South. And there were a lot of people who lived there. Now, today you have a lot of people who feel like we should give the land back to Native Americans. Right. There's a lot of people, kind of progressives and others, who are like, "Oh, we are on the land of the such and such tribe, and we need to recognize that fact, and we need to give them this property back." Well, number one, like, we're 200 years removed from this. I don't think that really makes sense, because it's not like the original people can be restored to their land. You've just got some type of posterity, but it's never been their property. Why should they get it? I bought this fair and square from someone else. I didn't, so it's just messy 200 years
Yeah.
later to try and like redo that. But the other part of this too is that land, like even with Israel, and Hamas and all this stuff, and Palestine and Gaza, it's like they've been battling over that land for thousands of
Yep.
years. "Oh, we were here first," and like, "Well, were you?" Right? Because, like, there were other people here before. Same thing with North America with these tribes. There were, all kinds of tribes back and forth. They were always warring, and so it's not like this land, I think, ever had, like, the original, people that we can somehow trace or know about. The Native American tribes from whom the land was taken, inevitably, at some point, their ancestors likely conquered other people who were there and took the territory. So it's just messy. It's really messy to go through. But to your question, Brittany, about manifest destiny, it was a very real thing. It was a very real sentiment in early America. I should point out here, maybe as a little teaser for our listeners, is that right now Elijah and I are working on volume 3 of our America's History book.
Ooh.
And this period, so volume 2 left off at 1791, which was right at the ratification of the Bill of Rights. And so volume 3 will pick up where we left off, basically birth of a new nation. We've got, this new constitution, this new government, Bill of Rights. And so we're going to do, 1792 all the way through when Abraham Lincoln gets elected. And so that includes, Trail to Tears. Elijah and I were just talking the other day about this, and how we want to approach it in our book, because it's something that a lot of kids aren't taught about. Typically in government schools, US government schools, the US government looks like the good guy. You talked a moment ago, Brittany, about empire. There's a book that I read, oh gosh, 8 or 9 months ago, I want to say. And this book, wow, I learned so much. It's not, I mean, this is going to sound like horrible or arrogant or something, but it's rare these days that I read something that's like legitimately new, that I'm like, how have I never known this before? But this book was one of them. It's called How to Hide an Empire.
Hmm.
And the book is about how America is an empire. Now, not in the sense that you were mentioning, Brittany, not about, hey, we're invading, Afghanistan or Iraq and so forth, which I think is a very fair argument to make. No, this was about Alaska and Hawaii
Mm.
and Puerto Rico and the Philippines. For some reason, not for some reason, I was never taught in government schools how the US government owned the Philippines
Yeah.
for years, and how people in the Philippines were saw themselves as Americans. They used American money. They named their streets like Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln and all this stuff. They saw themselves as Americans, but no one on the mainland had any clue that they were part of this American empire. That did you know? This is kind of a tangent, but when Pearl Harbor happened, the attack on Hawaii, and FDR gave his speech the following morning, and he says, this is a day that will live in infamy, and he talks about the attacks on the Hawaiian Islands. And so I remember, learning that speech, reading it, growing up and learning about Pearl Harbor, and it was all Hawaii. I had no idea until I read this book that on the very same day, the same time that the Japanese attacked Hawaii, they also attacked the Philippines because the United States controlled it and they were weak there. And there was this massive, horrible, horrible war in the Philippines because it was a U.S. controlled property, just like Guam and all these other, islands in the Pacific. And I had no idea. It was super fascinating to read about how America effectively was an empire. We were controlling these people, total control. It was military rule in the Philippines. There was horrible abuse and all kinds of stuff. And that was, the United. So to me, then, manifest destiny is really a problem when people feel entitled to do whatever they want, and they just claim, oh, it's because America's so great, or because we're entitled to rule the world, or we're supposed to be doing this. In reality, I think it's caused a lot of harm and suffering. And if we go back to the 1800s, to the time that we're talking about, I think it caused a lot of unnecessary harm. There could have been a very fair way to exchange with people, purchase property, live, co-equally, be able to, figure that out. But that was clearly not the sentiment at the time. They just wanted to kick all these people out and steal their land. And here we are talking about America and the land of the free and all this stuff, and they're literally committing genocide
Yeah.
and forcing these people out of their homes. It's a horrible stain on America's history, I think.
And one thing it really reminded me of too, Connor, is there's this really bad tendencies of government throughout all of history to use God to say they have the right to do something, and not in a bad way of saying like they are religious, in a way of saying like divine right of kings was something back in the day. It's part of what we rebelled against when we separated from England, where the king would say, "I was anointed by God, so you have to do what I said. None of you guys can do what I can do because God told me I can do it." And then you have and a lot of people believed it too, right? So then you have this like, wait a second, what? Like that's not a thing, and that's kind of what these early Americans, or actually politicians, I should say, did, right? They said, no, God has anointed me, our country, with the power to expand, and that's what our destiny is, and we have to do it. And that always makes me nervous because once you use that as a justification, where does it end?
Yep.
And so it just really reminded me of that divine right of kings, and how that used to be something that was so widely accepted. And I think like, huh. And I don't, I'd like to say that wouldn't fly today, but I think that instead of, using the word God to say that's what people are saying they're anointed by, I almost think that equity could almost be something you'd fill in there, oh, we have to do this for equity, stuff like that. But
Right.
it's interesting to me, and I think overall, yeah, I wonder if we could have expanded without force. And I don't know the answer to that. Obviously, we don't know what could have happened in history, but
Yeah.
I always think to myself, like, what if we had engaged in trade instead? What if we had been more peaceful with the Native Americans, and we didn't take where they were living, but we went, somewhere else near them, and we had peaceful relations.
Hmm.
I don't think anybody ever tried that, to my knowledge. I don't know if you know differently, but that wasn't our first line of defense. It was force.
Yep,
To,
and it's, why do we believe that somehow we're entitled to the current makeup on the map that we have, today? The United States of America could have flourished and grown and looked differently and had different lines on the map. And like, oh, hey, this is the independent nation of the Cherokee here, and we just go around it, or like that. Yeah, there could have been any number of things. It was not inevitable that we had to do it this way, and unfortunately, a lot of people suffered along the way. It is a point of history that's worth learning about, if for nothing else than to realize that. And this is the point we're going to kind of make in our volume 3 of the book, is that here you have the very same people who have ratified the Constitution, who have separated themselves from the tyranny of the crown in England, And these people are now in charge of self-governing. Are they going to live up to the ideals that they've stated? Are they going to be able to govern themselves and their neighbors in a way that their lofty, ideals and aspirations that they cited in the Declaration and the Constitution and so forth? And what you're going to find in the book, which, if you can find right now, if you know history, is that again and again and again, these people fall short of the stated ideals, and so many of these tyrannical problems that the colonists would have been horrified of the Kingdom of England doing, they're now doing themselves. So it's kind of a sad commentary on the ability of people to govern themselves and be committed to a set of principles. But there's a lot of hope along the way. There's a lot of people that are really trying to do the right thing. So it'll be a fun book to work on. It'll take us a while to do, but this particular topic will be definitely a chapter in there to delve into. For now, you guys can do your own searching on it. It is a topic worth exploring. Hopefully this planted a seed or sparked some curiosity. Brittany, great chatting as always. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
You've been listening to The Way the World Works. Make sure your family is subscribed and check out TuttleTwins.com for more awesome content.